Chapter 14 is on time, investments, and insurance. It often gets skipped because the input demands are the same thing as we analyzed in the last chapter. But given that the pressure on sustainability and the complexity of the decisions you have to make as a person, I feel like we need to spend a little bit of time on this. The first price that you need to know about is the interest rate. The interest rate is the time value of money, people call it. It's sort of the price of investable capital. Economics uses two definitions of capital, so make sure that you're clear on what you're talking about. Capital until now has always been a physical input, like a machinery. Now we're going to talk about investable capital, which is how the finance guys talk about it, which is a lump of money that you can use to do anything. You can buy machinery or you could even buy labor services. So be careful of the two different definitions going on at the same time. Interest is interesting because of compound interest. Compound interest means you get interest on your interest. So if you got 6% interest rate in 1 year, in year 2, your lump of money would be larger and you would get 6% interest on the whole. Einstein called compound interest the greatest scientific miracle that he knew of. The rule of 72 really illustrates the miracle of compound interest, because the question is, it's a rule of thumb, it's not a real rule, but the question is, how long does it take your investable capital to double? If your interest rate is 6%, you divide that into 72 and it tells you that there's 12 years to double. If the interest rate was 12%, it would only take 6 years to double. Even if the interest rate is 6%, it doubled in 12 years. In another 12 years, it would double again, but now that's 4 times what your original investment was. So there's compounding. Compounding shows up when you figure out the present discounted value, which is the next thing the book is doing. Present discounted value figures out what's the value today of an investment in the future. So that formula is the present discounted value equals the amount of money you're going to end up with at the end divided by 1 plus the interest rate, and that's an exponential. It's raised to the power of however many years that interest rate functions. The book then spends some time on the math of present discounted value, which we're probably going to skip. But then it comes down to talking about investment choices. How do you decide what investments to invest in? So when you work for a year, you're going to have some wages. If you don't spend all your money, you're going to have a little bit left. What are you going to do with it? The present discounted value is a really important thing to do, and you can solve for any of those parts, the value at the end, or the interest rate, or the present discounted value, and the book does talk about how to go from one to the other. But that's not the only decision on what to invest in. You might care about liquidity. You might care about risk. So that means that we want to talk about expected value, which is how do you calculate how much an investment might be worth when you take into account the risk. So what you look at is what's the probability that something's going to happen and what is the outcome. So if it's a 10%, if you flip a coin, the probability is 50% that it's going to be a head and 50% that it's going to be a tail. If a head pays you $1 and a tail pays you $2, then the expected value, half times 1 plus a half times 2, is 1.5. Now, not too many people are going to offer you that deal, but that's how to think about expected value. Clearly, the risk of your investment really affects the expected value. The other part of risky investments is that it has to do with your preferences. And so you're going to want to think about an indifference curve. So a good way to do that, and what the book does, is it then turns to insurance. When you buy yourself a new phone, do you buy the insurance? Now a hint is, well, why does Apple offer insurance? Because they make money. So that means what the customers are paying insurance, and then how much they're using that insurance, means there's something left over for the firm. Why does that happen? And the answer is risk aversion. Risk aversion means that we feel a little worse than the expected value when something really bad happens. Or maybe you just don't have an extra $600 in your pocket. And so the book shows the indifference curve for risk aversion. And that's really the key to thinking about insurance, which is how much are you willing to pay in utility terms to avoid losses. And as I said, the insurance company makes money because people are risk averse.